when word hit the streets that Chrissy Lampkin had been thrown out of her home. No one expected Jim Jones to be the one breaking down in tears. But that's exactly what went down. The Dipset legend, known for his swagger and control, was suddenly seen fighting back emotions as cameras rolled. It wasn't just about a breakup anymore. This was about guilt, heartbreak, and the collapse of a bond that once felt unshakable. For years, Jim and Chrissy were the power couple of Harlem, the definition of ride or die. But when life came crashing down and Chrissy found herself locked out, rumors started flying that Jim had finally cut her off completely. That this time, there was no coming back. Behind the scenes, insiders say Jim tried to play tough, pretending the move didn't bother him. But the truth, he was wrecked. Friends close to him revealed he couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. He kept replaying every fight, every word that led to this moment. What made it worse was knowing that everyone was watching, waiting to see how he'd react. Chrissy's fall wasn't just personal, it was public. And now, the streets are talking. Did Jim Jones finally push Chrissy too far? Or did she bring this heartbreak on herself? One thing's certain. When Jim finally spoke out, his breakdown left fans stunned, showing a side of him that no one had ever seen before. The story begins on a cold night in Harlem, when word started spreading that Chrissy Lampkin had been kicked out of the house she'd shared with Jim Jones for years. Neighbors saw movers outside, boxes piled up, and Chrissy standing there, her face hidden under sunglasses, holding her phone like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. It didn't take long before the videos started circulating online and fans couldn't believe what they were seeing. This wasn't just another celebrity argument or breakup rumor. This was real. For years, Jim and Chrissy had been the definition of loyalty, sticking together through industry drama, breakups, and public embarrassment. But now, it looked like that love had finally reached its breaking point. Sources close to the couple said it started with small arguments, money issues, control, jealousy, but things eventually spiraled out of control. Chrissy had been demanding stability, while Jim was juggling business, music, and his pride. When the shouting started, neighbors said they could hear Chrissy's voice echoing through the walls. "You told me this was our home," she yelled. And when Jim didn't respond, that silence cut deeper than any argument. Minutes later, she was seen walking out with just a few bags, her car waiting by the curb. The man she had stood by for over a decade had finally drawn a line. Word spread fast, and social media lit up. Some people sympathized with Chrissy, saying she had given Jim her best years and deserved better. Others defended Jim, claiming he had been patient for too long and that maybe this was his way of taking back control of his life. But regardless of which side people took, everyone agreed on one thing. This wasn't how anyone expected their story to go. Behind the scenes, Jim wasn't doing much better than Chrissy. Friends close to him said that right after she left, he locked himself in the studio, blasting old tracks, pacing the floor, and barely speaking to anyone. He kept telling himself he did the right thing, that it was time for both of them to move on. But every time he scrolled past an old picture of them online, that confidence started to crumble. Days later, Jim was spotted in Miami, but fans noticed something different. His usual energy was gone. No flashy chains, no smile, just a man lost in thought. One insider revealed that he had been calling Chrissy's phone constantly, but she refused to answer. That's when he broke down, not on stage, not in front of cameras, but alone in a hotel room, replaying every memory of the woman he once swore he couldn't live without. Meanwhile, Chrissy stayed silent publicly, but her friends weren't holding back. One of them took to Instagram and posted a cryptic message: "When a woman has given everything and still gets pushed out, she walks away with her head high. That's strength, not loss." Fans immediately knew who the post was about. But here's where it gets even deeper. Apparently, this entire situation had been building for months. People close to them say Jim had stopped coming home regularly, spending more nights at the studio and less time trying to fix things. Chrissy had started packing small things weeks before, almost as if she knew the end was near. For years, people joked that Chrissy was always chasing a ring that would never come. But this time, it wasn't about marriage. It was about respect. She had been by his side through everything from career lows to public scandals, and now, after all that loyalty, she found herself on the street with nowhere to go. When asked about it by a fan later that week, Jim simply said, "Sometimes love ain't enough." That one sentence hit harder than any breakup announcement. For the first time, seemed like Jim was admitting what he had avoided for years, that their relationship was broken beyond repair. Still, those close to both of them say the love hasn't completely disappeared. Despite everything, Jim keeps tabs on Chrissy, asking mutual friends how she's doing, and even sending quiet help her way when no one's looking. Deep down, he knows he might have gone too far and that the image of Chrissy walking out that night will haunt him for a long time. Because in the end, this wasn't just about a home. It was about everything that home represented. Years of loyalty, countless sacrifices, and a love story that had outlived its fair share of storms. But this time, it looked like even Jim Jones couldn't hold it together as the news of Chrissy being thrown out spread. Jim Jones found himself drowning in regret. At first, he tried to play it cool, telling his team to keep things private and focus on business, but the guilt started eating him alive. Every time he turned on his phone, there were clips of Chrissy outside the house, photos of her bags on the curb, and headlines painting him as a cold, heartless man. Behind closed doors, Jim wasn't cold at all. He was falling apart. His mother, Nancy Jones, tried to talk some sense into him, but even she could see the pain behind his pride. "You love that woman," she told him one night over the phone. "You can't just let her go like that." But Jim didn't respond. He just sat there staring at a half-empty glass, thinking about all the moments that led to this. The truth is, Jim and Chrissy's relationship had been cracking for years. Fame had changed everything: the pressure, the cameras, the constant judgment. Chrissy wanted peace and commitment, while Jim wanted freedom and space. They loved each other, but they couldn't seem to live in the same rhythm anymore. And when love turns into a tug-of-war, someone always ends up hurt. Days after the breakup went viral, Chrissy was spotted at a friend's condo in Jersey City. She looked exhausted but composed. No tears, no drama, just a woman who had finally had enough. Paparazzi tried to get a reaction out of her, asking, "Chrissy, are you and Jim officially done?" But she just smiled faintly and said, "I'm focusing on me." It was the kind of calm that comes after chaos, the kind that lets you know a storm has passed, even if the damage is still there. Meanwhile, Jim's friends started noticing changes. He wasn't showing up to the studio like before. He skipped meetings, ignored calls, and even canceled performances. He'd spend hours watching old clips of him and Chrissy on Love and Hip Hop, shaking his head like he couldn't believe how far they'd fallen. One night, a friend walked in and found him staring at an old photo of them on vacation. "I messed up," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I pushed her too hard." It wasn't just heartbreak, it was realization. Jim knew that no matter how many chains he wore or how much money he made, none of it mattered without the woman who had been by his side when no one else was. That's when he started reaching out, texting Chrissy, calling her, even trying to visit her. But Chrissy didn't respond. She needed space, and for once she wasn't chasing after him. Social media, of course, made things worse. Fans were divided. Some blamed Chrissy, calling her too emotional and controlling. Others blamed Jim, accusing him of playing with her loyalty for too long. Every post, every tweet was another reminder that their private pain had turned into public entertainment. And through it all, Jim started realizing how much of himself he had lost trying to protect his image instead of his relationship. Then came the emotional breaking point. Jim was scheduled to perform at a charity concert in New York, but when he got on stage, something shifted. As the crowd cheered, he started performing one of his old tracks, one that he had written during the early days of his relationship with Chrissy. Midway through the song, his voice cracked. The words stopped coming, and he turned away from the mic, covering his face. The band kept playing, but everyone in the room could tell something was wrong. When the music faded, Jim took the mic again, voice trembling. "Sometimes the realest ones we lose are the ones we take for granted." he said quietly before walking off stage. That clip went viral instantly. Fans flooded his comments with messages of support and heartbreak. "You can tell he still loves her," one fan wrote. Another said that man's realizing what he lost, and it's killing him. For the first time, Jim Jones wasn't seen as the tough rapper. He was just a man who had lost his peace. Meanwhile, Chrissy had been hearing about his breakdowns but refused to reach out. Her friend said she watched the concert clip and wiped a tear, but still she didn't text him. "It's not that she doesn't care," one friend explained. "It's that she's tired. She's done fixing something that keeps breaking." But fate wasn't done with them. A few nights later, Chrissy was spotted at the same lounge where Jim was having a private event. When she walked in, the room froze. Jim looked up, and for the first time in weeks, their eyes met. Neither said a word, but that silence spoke volumes. Everyone around them stepped back, letting them have their moment. Chrissy simply nodded and turned to leave, but Jim called out, "Chrissy, wait." The room went quiet. He walked up, his voice soft. "I never meant for it to go this far." She didn't respond, just looked at him, tears forming in her eyes. "You already did," she said before walking away. That brief exchange became the moment everyone talked about online. It was raw, emotional, and heartbreakingly real. For Jim, it was a wake-up call. For Chrissy, it was closure, or at least the beginning of it. Because no matter how much love was still there, some wounds cut too deep to ever fully heal. And as that clip circulated online, one thing became clear: this wasn't the end of a love story, but the painful truth of what happens when two people who once had everything lose sight of what really mattered. In the weeks that followed Chrissy's sudden eviction, both she and Jim Jones seemed to spiral in opposite directions, one fighting for peace, the other sinking into regret. Jim was haunted by what he'd done. He couldn't shake the image of Chrissy standing outside their home with her bags, refusing to look back. The guilt was relentless. He'd tell his friends he was fine, but everyone could see the weight in his eyes. This wasn't the tough, bothered Jim Jones the public knew. This was a man realizing he might have destroyed the only real thing he ever had. Meanwhile, Chrissy had moved into a quiet townhouse across the river. She kept her distance from the spotlight, ignoring interviews and avoiding social media. Her circle of friends said she was rebuilding, taking care of herself, focusing on work, trying to detach from the pain. But deep down, she was still replaying that night. The words, the silence. The feeling of being abandoned by someone she gave her entire world to. Then came the moment no one expected. Jim's breakdown on Instagram Live. He went live late one night, sitting in his car, hood pulled low, voice heavy with emotion. "I ain't even gonna lie," he began. "I've done a lot of things wrong. I let a good one walk away, and I can't even blame her for not looking back." His words were slurred, not from anger, but from exhaustion. People always talk about loyalty, but they never tell you how hard it is to keep it alive when you're broken inside. Fans immediately flooded the comments, begging him to call Chrissy, to apologize, to fix what he broke. But Jim ended the live abruptly, wiping his face and muttering, "Some things can't be fixed." The clip went viral in minutes, spreading across every major gossip page. Everyone was talking, fans, celebrities, even old castmates from Love and Hip Hop. Some said it was a PR stunt. Others saw the pain for what it was. Real heartbreak from a man who'd lost his anchor the next morning. Chrissy woke up to hundreds of missed calls and messages. Her friends were urging her to see the video, but she didn't want to. She had promised herself she wouldn't get pulled back into the same emotional cycle. Still, curiosity got the better of her. When she finally watched it, her eyes filled with tears. She had seen Jim vulnerable before, but not like this. This wasn't the man who argued, deflected, or made excuses. This was someone who had finally realized what she'd been saying all along. Later that week, Jim showed up unannounced at her building. No cameras, no entourage, just him, hoodie, jeans, sneakers, and a single rose. He waited outside for nearly 2 hours before Chrissy finally came out. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time froze. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I had to see you," he replied, his voice shaking. "Not to make excuses. Just to say I'm sorry," Chrissy sighed, clutching her coat tighter. "Sorry doesn't fix the damage, Jim. You made me feel small. You made me question my worth. And after everything I gave you, that's what hurts the most." Jim nodded, unable to speak. "I know," he said finally. "I thought being a man meant being in control. But I see now that being a man is knowing when you're wrong. And I was wrong about you, about us." The silence between them was heavy but honest. For a moment, it seemed like they might reconcile. But then Chrissy shook her head. "It's too late," she whispered. "I can't keep healing from the same wound." She turned and walked away, leaving Jim standing there in the cold, still clutching the rose. When she disappeared inside, he looked down, dropped the flower on the steps, and walked back to his car. Fans nearby caught parts of the scene on their phones, and once again, it went viral. The heartbreak was clear in his body language, shoulders slumped, head low, a man defeated not by fame or money, but by love lost. Over the next few days, Jim stayed quiet online. No posts, no interviews, no music. Instead, he retreated from everything, spending time alone, trying to find peace in the silence. Sources close to him said he was writing again, not just lyrics, but letters, personal notes about everything he wished he'd said sooner. Some believe one of those letters might even be for Chrissy. Chrissy, on the other hand, seemed to be slowly healing. She started focusing on her own projects again, showing up at a few industry events, smiling more. But even then, you could tell there was still pain behind the smile. Because no matter how strong she looked, love like theirs doesn't just disappear, it lingers. Buried under pride and heartbreak, by the time the media started losing interest, both of them had changed. Jim had learned what silence costs, and Chrissy had learned the power of walking away. It was the end of an era. A love story that once defined loyalty and passion had finally burned out. And yet the world couldn't stop talking about it because it wasn't just about two people breaking up. It was about what happens when love, loyalty, and ego collide in the spotlight. In one of his final interviews, Jim was asked if he thought he and Chrissy would ever find their way back to each other. He paused, smiled sadly, and said, "I'll always love her. That's one thing I can't change. But sometimes loving someone means letting them be free." And that's how the story of Jim and Chrissy ended. Not with a fight. Not with a scandal, but with silence, tears, and the painful truth that some love stories are too real to last forever. In the end, this wasn't just another celebrity breakup. It was the heartbreaking unraveling of a love story that once defined devotion in hip-hop. Jim Jones and Chrissy Lampkin showed the world what loyalty, passion, and pain look like when they collide. Watching Jim break down after pushing away, the one woman who stood by him through everything reminded fans that fame doesn't protect anyone from heartbreak. It only magnifies the pain. But here's the question everyone's asking. Did Jim finally realize too late that Chrissy was his piece? Or is this just another pause before fate pulls them back together again? Let me know what you think, because when love runs this deep, it never truly ends. It just waits for the next chapter to begin. It just waits for the next